Hello, welcome everybody. Excited to be here. My name is Kyle Buller, if you don't know, and I am joined by my buddy Lucas Jackson. What's up, Lucas?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. So today we want to dig in and chat a little bit about inner work. What is it? Why is it important? And also chat about this upcoming inner work group that we're putting together. So I'm excited to chat about it. It's a fun topic, I think, and an important topic. So yeah, I mean, we're just kind of freestyling off the cuff here. So who knows where this
Yeah,
will
man.
take us? I guess we are in what we would call process, right? So what we're focusing on with inner work is really trying to follow the process. Um,
Yeah, and we've been in this process for a while. I know we've been talking about a course like this for probably a few years, and it's just exciting that we finally are putting things together and ready to offer it to people.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So, when you think about inner work, like what's inner work to you, and why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it became like completely necessary. It just, I think there's a point that you get to where the stuff that's sort of bubbling up inside, the like emotional content, your past trauma, all that stuff just becomes so prominent in your life that you don't have a choice but to work on it. I think for a lot of people that's the case.
Yeah,
um, there's that quote, I don't know who said it, but if you listen to the whispers you don't have to hear the screams.
mm,
And it feels like, once you get burned a few times by not looking at this stuff, you realize that it's better to be proactive with it and actually engage with it before it engages with you.
yeah, totally, totally. Um, do you have any specific like theories, people that you look towards, or for your inner work, or what is your inner work process really consisted of over the past few years?
I don't know if I've been like super consistent in terms of like having a teacher or even a group of teachers, but there are definitely some influences that come and go with regularity. And I know in this course, like we want to focus a bit on some of Arnold Mindell's work. Um, I know like James Hillman has been a big inspiration for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Different aspects of Jung, and then there's like a whole bunch of other practices, I guess, that would be qualified as inner work. Um, I don't know if we'll be spotlighting them really in this course, but certainly their influence will be present because they've just changed me in such profound ways.
Yeah, yeah,
How about
definitely.
you? What's someone that sticks
Yeah,
out?
definitely. Mindel. I always say Mindel.
Yeah, I don't know.
Um,
I've only ever read it.
yeah. When I think about this, I really think about my undergrad, my transpersonal and integral psychology degree, where I was engaging. I mean, that was like an undergrad in inner work. When I really think about that program that I went through, I had a lot of experiential courses. And one teacher that I worked with, his name's Tom Werner. I believe he was a young, like I think he identified as a Jungian analyst, but he was also a student of James Hillman. So, I mean, he would bring in a lot of different Jungian and Hillman techniques, working with active imagination, working with dreams, working with like a lot of different journal prompts, to things that really kind of got you engaged with your own psyche in a very different way. And I'm thinking about, as I'm talking about this one journal prompt that I thought was really interesting. Um, if you have an issue, uh, what would it be like to, pull out your journal and start to write this issue to a friend? And then you have to put yourself in your friend's shoes and reflect back, um,
Hmm.
to you. And man, it's really interesting to try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to give yourself advice. And, I think a lot when I think about inner work, I always come back to Dr. Stanislav Grof. You and I both have a background in breath work and Stan's work. I'm sure it's pretty influential in your life as well. But, what they talk about is this inner healing intelligence. And to really kind of trust that inner healing intelligence. And I think when you start to engage in inner work, you're really starting to build a relationship with this inner healer, and working with psyche in a different way. And I think about the times when I was like so engaged in that, when I was going through this program, and so much magic would unfold. It was just very, very interesting to see things unfold. And in the past few years, I have my techniques, and um, I definitely work on myself alone. I guess Arnold and Dell working on yourself alone here. Um, but it's a little bit different. Like, I miss that. I miss being in a group to do this work. I miss that, like, container to do the work in. Doing it by yourself's one thing, and I think being able to do it by yourself is important. But I think there's also some magic when you have some sort of structure and you come together. Like, I just think about those programs where I was just, I mean, I would leave these groups, and it was fun because, like, the college was so small, and sometimes, like, I remember this one, like, imaginative course I took. I forget what it was called, but we did a lot of different expressive art and journaling, and some of my roommates were in it, and we just come back home, and everybody's like starts crying. They're like, "Whoa, what was that?" Because it really just brings up so much stuff. And you just, like, I remember just leaving some of these programs scratching my head going, man, what was that weird magic that unfolded
Mm.
during those hours together? So when I think about inner work, like, I get excited. I think we're kind of working with some sort of alchemical process when we're starting to work with the psyche, intentionally with different practices. So yeah, Hillman, Jung. I think some of the shamanic practices have really influenced me as well. Um, and one thing I think that we will be touching on within this course is this idea of process. Um, Arnold Mindell developed process-oriented psychology, and it's pretty interesting. But I've been really digging into another person that developed philosophy of an organism, Alfred North Whitehead, but people have described it as process philosophy, process theology. And so I've been really kind of digging into that stuff lately. And it's not so much on inner work. I mean, it's a cosmology and really gets into, like, metaphysics and math and stuff like that. But I think there's some interesting little nuggets as we're talking about process, to kind of really think about here.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I wanted to touch on, what you mentioned about having that group. And you're right. Like, being able to go through these experiences, even though so many of them are such individualized, individual experiences, like, especially talk about doing like a psychedelic ceremony or something, you really are in your own world, even as you are with a group. But then the real magic is like coming together and sharing these stories, I think. And you find these synchronicities that come up, that's what I'm excited for with this group, is that just seeing kind of, what's called the field, right? When the
Mm,
field is established, and what's in the field, and what kind of patterns might emerge, or what, because we'll have a group process as well. It's not just like our own process, the group is in process. And I'm really excited to see like how that takes shape. And we also, I know in preparing for this, we're talking about like our own processes. And I think there's this component of like fascination that arises as well. Like, as many times as I've tried to establish a regular meditation practice, and it failed, but really what brought me to wanting to do inner work every day is just finding the practices that fascinated me.
Mm,
What are the things that just keep me so excited and engaged, like excited to do them every day. And even if they change over time, like those are also in process. But just having that fascination, and that's what I hope we can do for people in this course is like offer so much that there's something that grabs their fascination, and they're just like,
yeah.
this is the work I want to do. It's this thing that like you didn't do it for the day and you're so tired in the evening, but you're just so attentive to the process
Hmm.
that you're going to do it before you go to bed.
Yeah. It's funny, just thinking about, I think a lot of people have this relationship with inner work where it ebbs and flows. And I know for myself that that's the case. And, just you talking about it grabbing you, there's times where like I fall out of a practice for a little bit because, maybe I'm always shifting my practices over time. Maybe it's a little bit more shamanic. Maybe I'm doing more journaling. Maybe I'm just doing like some somatic work. And, it's really shifting and using I feel like all these different tools in the toolkit and trying to use it when it's appropriate. But like, there's those times when life just kind of catches up on you and, you kind of fall a little bit out of practice. But when you find that thing that like you really just get into and you go, man, why am I not doing this more? Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm really excited about as well, is like, kind of helping people find what really attracts them and, gets them like excited about, kind of going inward, because there's a lot of magic that can unfold, during this time when you create an intentional container to hold this work. I'm just thinking about that container, like when you don't have it, it's just kind of all over the place. But to create this container to intentionally do that work, it's being held, it's being contained. And I think there's, other layers of processes that are able to unfold when that container is there. um,
Well, and I think I was just thinking about this the other day, that it's kind of funny that we're calling it the inner work group, because I don't even really draw a distinction between inner and outer so much.
right.
There's just this, like, it's just this process, because if you're not, I think what happens in the world and what we pay attention to is also reflective of our inner work. So we see the same themes coming up in our lives, the same relationship patterns, and that is also reflective of our inner work. They sort of mirror each other. And so when you really get into it, there's no real distinction between inner versus outer.
It's very true.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's just funny that we named it that, but it really is. It's like, you start working on the stuff that's really inner, like the psyche and, what's going on in your mind, your thoughts, your feelings and emotions. And then you start to see how those are also like projected on the outer world.
Oh, totally. Right. And things that we're projecting on the outer world that like we're not necessarily conscious of internally. And then when we're really setting that time aside to go in, we go, oh, yeah, there it is. Right. There it is out in the external world, is all inside of here. Um, my teacher Lenny talks about, this is kind of getting maybe a little too abstract, but he talks a lot about some of these projections being, abstractions, abstractions of what's coming inside of us and from the past, and it's all there just right in front of us, externalizing it. But what happens when we can bring that inside and do the work on it to maybe transmute it, change it, shift it? um, and I think, during this time we need a lot of, deep self-reflection. There's a lot of emotion coming up in the world, there's a lot of information that's floating around out there right now, a lot of discernment is needed. And I think as you, create that time to learn how to discern information within you, helps you to discern what you believe to be true out there as well. And I think that's really important during these times when it seems utterly chaotic. And it feels really hard to discern what is actually going on here. And how could I turn a little bit inward to maybe discern what's going on inside of me so I can maybe make some better sense of all the information that's coming from the external world.
Yeah, I think that brings up a lot of good reasons that process work is so useful, because just by recognizing that everything is in process, even as individuals, we are a process, that's happening. We're not just a static state. you know the idea that you can meet somebody and they're the same throughout their entire life is obviously false.
Mm-hmm.
And so why wouldn't that be true of collections of humans, of states and countries and the world? We're just in this process, and so we have this natural inclination to always want to label things and to know things. And change is scary for a lot of people. But if you can give up that idea that things should be the same, they should be identifiable and remain the same all the time, and you get more comfortable with this things being in flux and in process, I think that'll help anyone. I mean, I know that's like those teachings have been really useful for me right now, because everything is just up for change. Everything is changing so quickly, like day to day. Every 24 hours, I feel like it's a completely different world.
Oh man, yeah, I know,
Like
right?
there's nothing to grab onto.
Yeah. So we've chatted a little bit about process, and you were just kind of describing it, and it does seem like this might be somewhat of a big theme for this group as well. How do you approach this idea of like process work? What is it? What does it mean to focus on process?
Yeah. Well, Mindel particularly talks about like the primary and secondary processes. And the way I remember it being described is like you have this, like your conscious mind has this objective for the day. Like you're going to write a blog post, like that's your goal. But then um, that goal keeps getting interrupted by something. What is it? Like you're irritated by some outside noise, you're irritated by the dog barking or something, and you just can't focus, right? And so your primary process is the blog post. That's what you identify as your process. That's what you're trying to achieve. But then there's this irritation that's happening. And that would be your secondary process. It's kind of intruding on the primary. And so one of the goals of this is like identifying that secondary process, this irritation. There's something there, and then realizing it's not about the dog, it's not about the sound, it's not about whatever it is that's irritating you. There's something else that's going on inside that's bringing up these emotions, and it's being represented by these intrusions.
Mm,
So the first step is identifying, right, the secondary process, and then we'll start to kind of go into like maybe amplifying them or expressing them in other ways. Like what does that irritation feel like in the body? What does it look like if I draw this irritation? If I were to totally become irritated, what does this irritated person look like? How do they behave?
right.
Right? So then you embody that irritation. There's some voice there that wants to be heard,
Yeah.
and so you're giving it the time and the space to be expressed. And there isn't a goal of like getting rid of it
Right.
or ignoring it, especially, but just by engaging with the process, it changes.
Mm-hmm.
you know and you start to notice that you're not having the same response to these irritations anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, Mindel touches on there's no end goal here in process work, right? Because once you kind of get to something, it's already changed.
Yeah.
And now you're onto a new process of some sort, which might be irritating for some people, right? They're like, but I'm trying to get to this certain goal. And I think that is achievable, being able to follow a process. But even thinking about like, when I think about say, integration work for extraordinary experiences such as psychedelics. And we always say, trust the process, stick with it, stick with it. Um, that might change over time, right? And so analogy that I use is, you get an image, you get a symbol, you get something that draws you in the direction towards, which could be, we'll use this metaphor of going on an adventure. You get an image that draws you towards the mountain, and you have to stick with that primary process of moving. Well, this thing is attracting me towards, so I need to actually do the work to walk. And you start walking, and maybe something else comes up, and you want to switch paths a little bit. um, but if you didn't have that first attractor, that image, that thing that pops up in psyche, you would never start moving. And at first maybe your goal was to get to the mountain, but maybe as you started to engage in this process, this inner work starts to go in different directions and could be taking you places that you would never expect. um, I think that's being able to follow that can be really tricky, but I also think it can really lead down some interesting roads at times, and challenge, I guess, like our linear thought pattern going, it needs to be this one direction. When, maybe psyche has other things it wants to explore. Maybe it wants to shift. And maybe that thing, that first thing that really got you drawn towards it, was a thing that got you moving, got you to pay attention, to take action.
Yeah, and those lessons directly translate to the external world. Like this is where that inner outer definition like starts to break down, because as you're telling that story, how many times has that happened in your life where this thing that you thought you wanted, this job, that was going to be the perfect job, you're
All the
so
time.
excited about it, you start it, and 2 weeks in you realize this isn't what I thought it was. But then in the process of being there, you meet somebody else who brings you on another side adventure. You decide to start up a business with this person, and it's like the perfect thing. But you never would have met that person without starting that job that you thought was perfect. So that's like the idea of having a goal that you're just going to hold on to no matter what comes up isn't always the most effective way to move through life, because these other things can kind of sweep you away. So if you're remaining in that process, uh, you recognize that the goal is also in process.
Makes me think about like Dan Siegel's theory on rigidity. Forget the other terminology he used, but really bouncing between rigidity and flow. I think he might have used
Mhm.
another word for flow. Um, but just thinking that, like, oh, here's this thing, and I need to do this certain, this very kind of linear, structured way, and being able to break out of that can be really challenging. And I think, like, when we're thinking about actually making change in our life, how do we become a little bit more open to flow and to trust the process? Like, I'm just thinking about
Yeah.
times in my life where, I'm doing all this, like, this conscious work to make some sort of change in my life, but there's something inside of me that just feels so rigid, and I can't seem to break free from it. I'm like, I just need to, like, go do something. But then there's this fear that blocks me from ever taking any action, right? And so, um, I think, how do we start to work with that and bring flow into it when there's these rigid structures that may be blocking us? And I think being able to incorporate process thinking can be really important, because it's like, well, let me just follow that and see what happens, right? For me, when I think about that, it's like we're always doing experiments and always testing it and being like, well, I don't know. Instead of thinking, oh, I know that I'm not going to like this. Well, do you? What happens if you just do that? What will happen? And just being curious about following that, and seeing what unfolds. And, some really interesting things can happen when you start to just become a little bit more curious.
Yeah, and that's I think bringing up this concept of like edge work,
Yeah.
like playing the edge, right? It's this thing repulses me, disgusts me, angers me, upsets me, whatever this like strong emotion is. but how can you engage with that emotion and kind of ride that edge and see what that has to teach you?
Hmm.
And I like what you were saying about the rigidity flow thing, because I think we all tend to one side or the other of that spectrum, and there is like a balance that needs to occur. It's not like you have a goal and anything that catches your eye, like, oh, this is the new process, so I'm going to jump to that, and you never really achieve anything,
Right.
and then you also don't want to just hold on and not be able to adapt to new situations either. So it's really like finding that balance, which is another reason a group is great, because they can kind of help you discern, right? Kind of, you can bounce ideas off of people and develop that discernment skill.
Totally, totally. Yeah, and I think even Dan Siegel's talking about balance between those two states is really important. And, when you're thinking about trauma, because this is where he's talking about it, is like just being stuck in that rigid state, not being able to break free from it. How do we bring flow back into it? I forget if he used the actual term flow, but that's how I'm thinking about it
It,
right now.
it works.
Yeah, it's I guess, to give an example of something like this. I remember one day I woke up and it was just like one of these days where my emotions are getting the best of me. I don't want to do anything. I'm lounging around, putzing around the house, just being like, fuck this day, you know? And then, I knew there was a friend that was playing music, and I was just like, I really don't want to go. I don't really feel like being social right now. And then I was like, oh, I'm aware of this frustration and this resistance to actually doing something. And I was like, well, okay, I know. And so this gets on this edge work. It's like I see myself resisting because there's something inside of me that just, it wants to do it, but there's another part that just wants to resist it, because resisting it is so much easier than actually going to do what something inside of me is telling me to do. So I ended up saying, okay, I'm going to use this as an experiment. I'm going to push against this resistance. I'm going to get on my bike and I'm going to go down to this place, go see some music. Um, and it was really interesting. Ran into my buddy and was telling him something about the beach. And we ended up planning a nice beach trip with another one of my really good friends. I mean, we're all childhood friends, and we haven't done anything like that in ever, I think, like years. And so I always think about that time where it was like, what if I just sat with whatever was coming up and I didn't take that action, and I didn't say, I'm going to be curious right now and I'm just going to experiment, even though I don't want to be social. I'm going to see where this takes me. And then it ended up creating this really awesome moment with like some good childhood friends, where it was like, would that have ever manifested if I said, I'm just going to sit here and just sit with the resistance, instead of saying, I'm going to test this edge and I'm going to be curious where it's going to take me if I push against it. Um,
Yeah, and that's another good point about edges, is you can identify them through recognizing patterns.
yeah.
Like, does that come up every time that there's a plan to go do something? Like, do you always bump up against that edge where you're just like, nah, maybe I don't feel up for it? And so like, then you can identify the edge. And edges also have this thing to do with cycles, right? Mindel talks about cycling, and you kind of repeat these patterns until you sort of get the lesson, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way you do that is by engaging with the edge and going over it. So I think that's a perfect example. Like, you kind of went over that edge,
Yeah.
and this whole other process unfolded.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like one of those things that definitely went down in the memory books, where it was like, wow, like, I'm so glad I push against that edge. And I had to be conscious of it. I had to say, Kyle, just give up the Hudson and just experiment, experiment, experiment. You don't know where this is going to take you.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it leads you to disappointment and more frustration, then that's totally fine, because guess what? You just learned something about yourself even more. But you don't know. And so, yeah, how are we dancing with that? And that's why I kind of love some of this process work and working with edges and really trying to understand yeah, some of these things that are coming up, and being able to work with the internal process here can lead to
And
some things.
it works so well with the holotropic and transpersonal breath work and framework, just like the idea that nothing is going to happen is just impossible.
Yeah.
Something always happens. Like whether you went or didn't go, something happened. You're still having an experience, even if it's just in breath work, for example, even if it's just like a blank screen and you're bored, and then your boredom leads to frustration, or you're annoyed that you spent this money. And so what is that annoyance? What's coming up?
Yep.
Something is clearly happening.
And it's really interesting, like I don't know if you've ever been in groups where like, or this has even happened to you. I know it's happened to me where I've had those sessions where I'm like, oh, I can't believe I just like wasted this time here. I'm pissed off about it. But then really being able to be open to that process after the workshop and just watching what really unfolds. I mean, sometimes it could be really mind-boggling, being like, what's going on here? I had a session like that where I was so pissed off. I was like, oh, fuck this. Like, I wasted my money coming down here for the weekend. Nothing's going on. And towards the end of the session, somebody did some body work on me, and it, blasted me open. And I had this huge this symbolism that really appeared, this image that appeared, and it all kind of tied back to work and the situation I was in. And I was like, damn it, like, I'm more frustrated that I'm stuck at this job. I want to leave. I can't quit. It's kind of a complex situation that's going on. And then, I'm sitting with it, the weeks unfold. And I'm walking away from this workshop being like, it wasn't the big transpersonal experience that I wanted. I wanted to, have the ego death experience and really kind of do the deeper transpersonal stuff. This seems really superficial. I was just pissed off about it. 3 or 4 weeks later, I go into work, and my boss gives me a letter closing up the shop in a week. And I just scratch my head and go, well, I guess that worked itself out. Like, how does that work?
I don't know, man. I've had a similar experience with a psychedelic session I was in. That I went into it with a problem roommate that was really on my mind. Like, just it had been bothering me for a long time. And similar experience, like went through all this stuff not really related to that, but like my own, whatever trip, and came out of it and turned my phone on, hours later, and got a text that this person was moving out of the house.
So weird.
And it was just like, wow, okay. Like, I don't know, like, are they connected? Maybe not, but just the way that lined up was like, I don't know.
But that's what gets me sometimes really excited about, doing some of this inner work, is being able to like open different channels, or open different pathways of being and seeing, and then just seeing where it leads, right? It's not always going to lead to something that you like, the intention that you're putting into it. Like I had no intention on that unfolding, just kind of
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
And maybe subconsciously I was picking up on cues, throughout the months, weeks, and being like, oh, maybe there is something shifty going on, and maybe that's just what came up in my experience, and then I was
Yeah.
processing it that way. But I don't know, whenever I've really engaged in a lot of this, there's always some interesting synchronicity that starts to unfold, and gets me more curious than anything. It makes me more curious about my relationship to the universe, and I go, what is going on here? When I take the time to really, go in and work with stuff, seems that it has larger impacts at times on, you know, I don't know how to make sense of it sometimes. It makes me ask more questions, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I'm really excited about with this group, is that it's such an opportunity to play, like to play
Yeah.
around and like explore, because I really like the idea of just exploring, and like exploring consciousness, exploring your inner life, without having a goal. You know,
Yeah.
the like play, you just don't have a goal. You're just enjoying it, enjoying the fun and exploring how your body works in relationship to other bodies, or you know, just whatever it is. Like it's just total exploration for the enjoyment of the pursuit, I guess.
I love this. And, you know, I don't think like we've chatted about this when we're putting the curriculum together and thinking about what do we really want to offer here. But, you know, now that you're saying it, I mean, this is definitely a goal of mine. It's like when I'm thinking, I'm looking at like the structure, what we've created here. Yeah, I mean, we want people to make goals. We want people to come in with something that they're working on, or something that they want to work on to be able to engage, right? The, what do we call that? The prima materia, that all the material that's really sitting there and composting. I know both of us had dreams about composting of the material. Um,
Well, was it in the book or not? It might have been something else where he talks about getting your shit together,
it might have
and
been in the book, but I don't
he
know.
says to get your shit together, you have to have shit to
Yeah.
begin with.
Yeah, we all carry it around. But and I think this is like really important. And you know, I think like some inner like programs that focus on this, it's like, you know, really structured, and sometimes people want to be like really strict about their work and very serious about it. And there are elements I think that need to be respected and have a bit of serious, but I'm also really wanting to approach this with a lot of play. Like when are we giving ourselves the permission to just experiment and to just learn how to develop a relationship with ourselves with play and just be curious, and you know, maybe start with a really strict goal and aim, and you realize like, wow, I just needed to play around with that and see where it really takes me. I think it's important. It's
Yeah.
something that's so I think lacking at times, right? Like, you know, I've definitely been to different ceremonies that's like it needs to be this way, it needs to be serious. And then, you know, I've had teachers that are like, when was the last time you played? When was the last time you just had fun? You know, it's like, yeah, we don't do that too much as we get older, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's also, you know, in flow as well. But I definitely, at least, and especially lately, need to or feel the need to cultivate that a bit more. Like play is somewhat challenging, like with the weight of the world and the weight of the news and just everything that's going on. It's almost like a radical act to engage in play.
Totally. Yeah. I
Like
agree.
how often do I know I feel guilty sometimes in doing things that are just pure enjoyment, you know, not there's no goal, there's no purpose. I'm not trying to like build this into my idea of success. And then I can often feel guilty about it, you
Right.
know. So just allowing yourself to play is an amazing kind of edge in some ways.
I think it's a big edge for a lot of us. And you know, actually, on one of the recent podcasts that I released with on Psychedelics Today with Lauren Taus, that was something that we got into. I don't, and yeah, I think it was on our episode on Psychedelics Today. I chatted with her a few times and don't remember where we chatted about it, but yeah, just like being playful with it, and just giving ourselves permission. And it's really hard, especially with all the as you said, the weight of the world. It feels like we always need to be on, and we need to be really serious about everything at times. But are we creating this time to just like explore, be curious, like be a tinkerer of you know, the inner workings, and be like, what happens if I tweak this? What happens if I tweak that? You know, see what happens.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been fun. I'm sure we could keep riffing a little bit more. Um, so I guess I just want to say, yeah, if people are interested in joining us, you could check out this upcoming course. We're doing a beta launch for this, so you know, this is going to be you know, the first edition, so it's going to be the cheapest, and you can check it out at settingsunwellness.com. If you go up to courses, it'll say inner work group. If you're following me on Instagram, you just click the link in the bio and go to the InnerWork group button there. And so the group starts on September 1st and goes to October 20th, and we're going to meet on Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern, 8 to 8:30 Eastern. So it'll be a hybrid kind of course where Lucas and I will provide some material, some video, and then you'll watch it, and then we'll spend an hour and a half together doing various exercises, journal prompts. We're going to be diving into dreamwork. We're going to have 2 online breathwork sessions. So yeah, if you want to dive in, play a little bit, do some deep work, dive deep into psyche, check this out. We're super excited to be putting it on. I'm really excited, and I've been spending, for those that have been following me here at Setting Sun, I've been a little quiet here and there. Psychedelics Today definitely takes up a lot of my time, and I've been wanting to get a little bit more back into some of this work that I've been so seeped in for many years, and have kind of, I guess, put it on the back burner a little bit because trying to build a business on the side and going through grad school. And so I think I'm coming out on the other side and trying to create more time for all this stuff. So I'm super pumped for it. This is
Yeah,
definitely where my passions lay.
I think I want to highlight a bit more just the experiential component
Yeah.
to this, because I think we both wanted to pre-record videos to be watched each week, because our time together we want to spend engaging in the process and engaging in conversation, getting to know each other, rather than like just having us present a bunch of information live. It's all about us kind of coming together and discussing what's coming up. And along with that, we will have the like you said, the breathwork sessions, and we talked about offering homework every week, some practices to do on your own, and various reading lists, resource lists, and we'll even be doing some like creative projects after breath work and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited just to create this time to explore together. Um, and just to get to know everybody, to really kind of create this intimate container to dive deep. So it's also limited. We want to create more of an intimate container here, and it's not going to be a huge course open to a lot of folks. So I think we're capping it around 10 people. So if you're interested, definitely fill out an application and check it out. But yeah, Lucas, you want to end with anything? You want to wrap with anything?
No, I think that's a key component, just keeping it intimate, keeping it small. I've been in some classes on Zoom that are, it's just a wall of faces, and you don't get to really meet too many other journeyers. But it's really about like connecting with each other and sharing this like group process as well. So that's pretty important to me that we're
Yep,
doing that.
totally. Yeah.
But yeah, man, so excited. This is awesome, and really like fired up, ready for September 1st to begin this.
Yeah, likewise. And thanks for co-collaborating on this. And if you're checking this out, I hope you're interested and excited to hopefully get to know you on this journey. And I guess one little thing that I like to do for inner work is pay attention to dreams. So, maybe I'll plant that seed. Maybe write down a dream in the morning for the next day, whenever you're listening to this, and see what might come up for you. So thanks for tuning in, and yeah, we'll talk to everybody later. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.